be able to keep up with me. And if we want to be realistic, I was afraid he'd break an artificial hip or suggest riding dinosaurs as activity or something. Now, in the beginning, I tested him a little. I'd make him do things like play basketball in the hottest part of the day, and we went on a mountain hike, and I even made him run with me once, though that never happened again. And he'd just go with it and do his best, and it was good. So it fell into a sort of routine. I'd have a bad day at school, and on my way...
I come to speak for everybody here. I'm a little bit nervous. I'm going to have to get it. My name is Joel Steiner. I'm a mentor supervisor, an assistant to Mrs. Sim Gordon. I started working for Kav L'Noar in 2010 as a mentor when I was a social work student. At the time, I was trying to figure out who I would be working with. Teenagers was the bottom of the list, really the last thing on my mind. I was the most well-behaved kid in high school. I hope none of my teachers are here. But I was fresh out of college.
ואז הפתרון זה חונך. חונך הוא לא אבא, הוא חבר. ילד לפעמים מתבייש מאבא שלו, אבא זה דמות שמחנכת. חונך הוא בסך הכל חבר, אבל חבר קצת גדול. ילד שיש לו חונך לעולם לא ישפיל אותו, ולעולם לא יחרים אותו, ולא ינדו אותו. ילד עם חונך הוא ילד עם הרבה ביטחון עצמי, עם הרבה חוסן נפשי. למרות שהחונכות לא ממש משהו.
שיהיה להם טוב. וזה קו לנוער, קבוצה של ילדים שכולנו יהיה טוב. תודה רבה להם.
At the Hebrew University, who was Nobel Prize worthy. He was a genius, but as often happens to us geniuses, he was somewhat forgetful. And one day he got up on the bus to go home, and he forgot completely where he lived. And the bus driver finally said to him, "Professor, this is your stop." And he got off, and he looked around, and he didn't remember the address of his home, where he was. And he was very distraught. And in the distance he saw a young boy bouncing a ball. And he called out to him, he said, "Yelad Bohega, come here." And the boy came, and he said to him, "Ata makir habayit shel ha'professor? You know the house of the professor?" And the child said to him, "Abba, you don't recognize me?" Part of the problem of generations is that we don't recognize each other. Very hard for people who are adults to live in the world. All the strictures in the world won't prevent it. But then the question is how to deal with it. How to use it for its advantages, which are enormous, and how to be careful of its disadvantages. And the problem is not only material that is not moral, but the problem is that it changes the focus of students and children. I had the experience of teaching Talmud this year to many young men, and one of the classes I said, well, you know, maybe somebody will look up what the Meiri says on this. And the next day I asked, did anybody look it up? And he said, yeah, you know, someone raised their hand. And I asked him, well, where did you get that Meiri from? And he said, Rabbi Google. And Rabbi Google is a good source.
Extends to Jewish children who need it so desperately in such a difficult time as we live in. Once again, thank you, Ambassador.
That makes it all possible. Although I have only been a mentor for a short time, I am most impressed with the mentor program. For a mentee, this relationship may be the only light in the darkness in which he is constantly consumed. A mentee may put on a tough exterior, but inside he is an innocent child desperately in need of warmth and care. It is our job as mentors to be a firm rock to provide stability and care to a mentee who for some reason or another cannot find it elsewhere. We are role models and friends, teachers and confidants, all rolled into one. It is an awesome responsibility and an honor to be part of the team. It is my privilege to now call upon the founder of Kav L'Noar, Dr. Ronald Wachtel, to introduce our keynote speaker.
Mr. Menashe Weiss, who has given unstintingly of his time and energy over the past
in the process. Our staff's strong commitment to this model has Baruch Hashem enabled us to bring health and stability to many hundreds of families over the
Dr. David Pelcovitz, who I believe could easily have authored these same words. Those of us who know Dr. Pelcovitz well have the zchut to engage in a relationship with someone who is not only a mensch in every sense of the word, but who also radiates tremendous emunah in Hashem's Torah that manifests itself in unconditional love and derech eretz for each person. We are most grateful to you, David, for sharing your wisdom and inner being with us each year at this time. I want to wish you good health, much nachat from your family, and the ability to continue serving as a shliach of warmth and sensitivity, couched with
than we do. That's never happened before. To the extent that most children who have been born since 1980 are digital natives, and anybody born before 1980 are digital immigrants. There's the challenge that we all have when we're trying to figure out how to deal with this, how to deal with coming up with proper kinds of filtering programs, monitoring programs, which you could get information on in the back, but how do you do it in a way that doesn't what the mind knows? Hopefully, after I speak about some of the more subtle impacts of the internet, you'll be able to see it. Once you can see it, the next step becomes obvious in terms of how to shape it. I heard a beautiful thought from Rav Asher Weiss, where he talks about machlokas in the Gemara and Sufin. It's not even a machlokas. They actually come to a conclusion about how to refer to the Harabatis, how to refer to our acquisition of Torah in some ways. And based on a pasuk in Yeshaya, they say there are two ways of looking at the Harabatis. One is, if you go according to Abraham's way, it's a mountain, a har. Yitzchak says it's a sada. And Yaakov, it's a bias. The Gemara tells us that the way we view it is, the Gemara Paskins is as a house. So Weiss says, many ways that's a metaphor for what we're going to be talking about tonight. He says, why a house? Why a house in dealing with our relationship to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and our relationship to acquiring knowledge and wisdom? He says, because a house has walls, a house has windows, and a house has doors, which is, I think, a brilliant way of thinking about it. We don't really have the option of totally shutting out, like we've been hearing until now. We can't. It's not an option. It's been widely quoted, the statement of Rav Yoel of the Satmar Rebbe in 1950, who said that his Hasidim saw more in one bus ride from Williamsburg to Manhattan than their grandparents saw in a lifetime in the shtetl. So that was in 1950. I don't even know what they saw in 1950. We don't, it's hard to imagine. It's hard to imagine. But the States, one of the most disciplined, most decorated soldiers in the United States, the general who led the most recent wars in the United States, is now living a life of disgrace because the head of the CIA actually forgot what he was doing when he was online and left all kinds of public evidence of an affair he was having with another woman. Amazing that even he, who was a paragon of says fascinating insight that I didn't understand until this story took place, says that if you're malbim pnei chavero b'rabim, which is basically what cyberbullying is about, or when you're cruel in a public way to somebody online, which is a fairly common thing nowadays, he says you can't do tshuva for it, right? Because I'll say you can't do tshuva for such a horrendous sin as shaming somebody in public. So he asked why. That doesn't make any sense. You could do tshuva for murder. Why can't you do tshuva for something that seems like a lesser sin? So he says because the typical person who's mevayish somebody barabin has no insight into what they're doing. There's no hakaras lefeit. Let me tell you a story that'll make this more clear, and then we'll move on to the next two sections. The story goes like this. I'm at a yeshiva high school in the center of the United States. And I'm sort of schmoozing with the principal of the school. And he says, you know, last night we had the 25th reunion of our class, graduating class 25 years ago. And he says, you're going to be amazed at what happened. He said, all of these women who are now middle-aged, they're in their early 40s, are gathering around and talking. And a woman who nobody really knew who she was comes storming into the room where they're having the reunion, and she immediately rushes to the group of women who were the social leaders of that school back 25 years ago, the queen bees of the school, the girls who at the time were sort of cruel and would engage in all kinds of social exclusion. And she comes rushing over to the former queen bee of their class. And she's carrying the diary which she kept when she was in high school. She doesn't say a word to anybody, but she shoves the diary in the hands of this woman who was talking to all of her friends who were part of the group that tormented this woman 25 years earlier. And she says, read. Opens up page, and the woman is sort of shocked, and she says, I said read. And sort of in shock, she reads the page, and the page says something along the lines of, last night I came home after the girls made fun of the dress I was wearing in school today, and they were so devastatingly cruel to me, I decided this is going to be the last day of my life. I'm finally going to take the pills today. Goodbye, cruel world. Fine. Keeps going. She turns a few more pages, and it's an entry on a Monday night. She says, came to school today, Monday morning, and found every member of the high school 12th grade was invited to a party this weekend. I was the only one not invited. What's the use? Today I'm going to finally get the courage to do it. And she goes on, page after page. Principal tells me it was like watching a train wreck in slow motion. He was horrified. Everybody in the room was horrified. He says, then, this woman, the queen bee, who so tormented her fellow classmate 25 years earlier, together with her friends, look at this woman and say, I'm so sorry, but frankly, I don't remember any of this. I truly don't remember it. If I did it, I'm sorry, but I just have no recollection whatsoever. The principal said, you know something? She was telling the truth. I'm totally convinced she was telling the truth. That at the time, there was no hakaras lefeit. It was coming from her insecurities. He was an old-time principal. He knew this group. He said that they had no idea. They had no idea whatsoever.
that's what Rabbeinu Yonah means about being beyond Shiva. Our job as parents is to recognize that as horrible as in-person bullying is, when cruelty is done over the internet, especially berabbin, as it can be, it's something that we have to take very seriously. We have to sit down with our kids. We have to sometimes just have planned discussions with them about how much more careful.
The silence of our friends. Something else we have to do with our children is to teach them how to be heroic, to teach them that if they know of somebody else being treated harshly among their classmates or in the neighborhood, or somebody who's being victimized in some ways by the cruel words of others, either online or in person, that they have a real doraisa based chiyuv of lo saman al dam reacha, right? It's literally something that how many doraisas are involved in that? We could go through. Research is showing in terms of how kids in this generation don't have to deal with frustration in the same way. You know, in the old days, you used to buy a music album. So let's say, you buy a Shweki album, or whoever the musician was. Might have been a secular album, whatever it was.
Fear of any adolescent, they literally would not sleep. And or they wouldn't dream. They wouldn't go into REM sleep. When you don't dream, you can't learn. You can't consolidate learning. And you literally can't rest. And it got to the point that they need to be hospitalized. It may sound like an exaggeration, but that's where the world could go to. Okay.